We are done with the discussion about perfect competition and monopoly, and we call those perfect structures because the assumptions that we have are very rigid. Now we're moving to imperfect markets where the models that we'll talk about are more realistic. Most real world markets are competitive, and we will see they are not perfectly competitive because firms in these markets can possess some market power to set their price as monopolies do. However, that market power is not so strong. One such market structure is monopolistic competition, which is very close to perfect competition but does not have the same rigidity as perfect competition when it comes to many assumptions. So let's talk about monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is a market structure in which the industry is made up of a fairly large number of firms, which means that there are many firms, just like perfect competition. But the important factor to understand is that these firms are small relative to the size of the industry, which means that the action of one firm is also unlikely to have a great effect on any of its competitors. So, for example, if firm A decides to lower the price, firm B may not actually be worried about it because the market is still very large and the market share of each firm is very small. In other words, firms still are acting independently. These two assumptions, which is the industry is made up of a fairly large number of firms and the fact that each firm is small relative to the market, means this is the market structure that has a lot more common with perfect competition. However, the third assumption, which makes it different from perfect competition and therefore results in a downward sloping demand curve, is the idea that firms produce slightly differentiated products, which means they are not homogeneous or identical like perfect competition. This also means that a consumer can easily tell one firm's product from another, which means that there could be what we call brand loyalty, because if we like one product more than the other, then we are likely to pay a higher price for that, and that means also there will be a relatively inelastic sort of demand curve. Lastly, an important factor to consider is that in this market structure, just like perfect competition, firms are completely free to enter or leave the industry, which means there are no barriers to entry or exit. When we see all these assumptions, it's very clear that perfect competition and monopolistic competition are very similar. Where monopolistic competition is different from perfect competition is that firms produce differentiated or non homogeneous goods. However, these products are slightly different, which means there are close substitutes to each other. This product differentiation can result in the firm to have what we call a downward sloping demand curve, which means they have an ability to set the price. But because these goods are very close substitutes, the demand is relatively elastic, and also the fact that there are a large number of firms in the market means consumers have a lot of choice. A good example of monopolistic competition could be your dry cleaners or hair cutters, or even, like, for example, food stores, which are many in any neighborhood, and therefore it gives a lot of choice for a consumer to choose from. In these industries, a large number of firms compete, selling differentiated products that are heavily sort of advertised, and firms come and go under the pressure of competition. Now, let's see monopolistic competition in the short run. When we look at monopolistic competition in the short run, we need to understand that these are profit maximizers, which means that the output will be decided where MC equals to MR. So the diagram we will draw will show that there is a downward sloping demand curve, although it will be very elastic, but the profit maximization will be happening where MC equal to MR because price and MR will be different. As you can see, this is a downward sloping demand curve which is very elastic, and MR is below the demand curve because this is a price setter. Now when I draw my marginal cost curve, the cost curves do not differ due to market structures. They remain identical. MC equals to MR may happen at, for example, let's call this Q a dash, and the price that will be charged will be, for example, P dash. Now whether the monopolistic competition firm will make supernormal profit or not will depend on the fact where the average total cost is. So if the average total cost is below the price, which what I'm drawing here, you will have a possibility of a supernormal profit in the short run, because now the firm can have a price greater than ATC when MC is equal to MR. Just how much profit the firm will make in the short run, however, will depend on the strength of the demand. And the strength of the demand means number one, the position, and number two, the elasticity of demand. What do we mean by that? Well, if the demand is much higher, which means further to the right, then we can say relative to the average cost, the firm can charge a higher price and therefore will make a larger profit. Similarly, the more elastic the demand will be, the lower will be the profit, or the more inelastic the demand will be, the higher will be the willingness to pay, and therefore the greater will be the firm's profit. So two things will matter. Number one, the position of the demand curve, which means if it's high, there will be higher profit. Number two, the inelasticity of the demand curve, which means the more inelastic the demand curve, the higher will be the profit, because firms can charge a higher price because consumers are willing to pay much more. We can therefore argue that the firm which is facing little competition and whose product is considerably different from that of its rival may be able to earn considerable short run profit when they are under monopolistic competition. Let's discuss long run in the next video, where there could be entry of new firms and that can result in the profitability to be driven down to zero.